The Fed has just become a big problem for crypto. Bitcoin and altcoins sold off this week as Powell delivered some bearish news from the podium, the effects of which might stick with us for weeks or even months. And something he told us at the end could have an impact on us until 2028. In this video, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know so you can make it through this volatility with clarity and conviction and come through cleaner on the other side. So that sounds good. Throw me a like down below and let's find out what is going on. Now, guys, what we saw happen earlier this week was the FOMC meeting. The Fed gets together, they hike rates, they don't hike rates. Powell comes out, says a few things, and the markets crash. And that's basically what happened. Now, he told us a few things that were kind of bearish, and he hinted at something that I think is probably the biggest threat to crypto. And I'm going to get onto that in a second. But first, we have to talk about what they said about rate cuts. Now, guys, what you're looking at on your screen is a dot plot. This is a summary of economic projections. The Fed gets together. They say, this is what we think is going to happen. How many rate cuts are we going to get? Now, what they put in, you had 7 of the Fed members say that we don't think we're going to get any more cuts. No more cuts for the rest of the year. We're in March. We had 7 people say that we think we're going to get 1 cut. A handful of others think we're going to get 2 or more. So what we're looking at right now basically is we're only going to see 1 rate cut. Previous to this, what the market was expecting was about 2 to 3 rate cuts, and now we're only getting 1. And furthermore, across the pond, we have the European Central Bank expecting rate hike talks in April with a move more likely in June. And so now we have one of the major central banks getting ready to hike rates, and the Fed might not be far behind. Now, why do rates matter? Because the lower rates go, the more expansion we have in the economy, the cheaper money is to obtain, and more wealthy people feel at the end of the day. Now, we're moving away from that goal. And this is something that markets are spooked by, and we saw a sell-off as a result. And I know some of you might be thinking, there's no way we could possibly get rate hikes. We're supposed to be getting rate cuts. And I thought the same thing as well. And there's a key economist who's actually identified the possibility of a hike. Claudia Sahm, you might be familiar with the Sahm rule, where we can use this economic indicator to identify the start of a recession. Well, this is her, and this is what she thinks.
So at this point, the Fed really can't take anything off the table, and it is possible the next move will appropriately be a hike.
Now, typically a rate hike is never great, and markets have already started to price out some of the rate cuts they were expecting. But I want to bring us over to TradingView and have a look, because I want to tell you that it's not all doom and gloom. It's not all bad news, because yes, we do have situations. So we have the Fed funds rate here in black. This is interest rates. We have Bitcoin in orange. Go figure. Here you can see, starting kind of towards Bitcoin's inception, we have Fed funds rate going higher, Bitcoin going lower. Fed funds rate going lower, that's rate cuts, Bitcoin going higher. Over here, you have rates going higher, Bitcoin also going higher. And then here you have rates going higher, Bitcoin also going higher. And so yes, typically the market will react negatively to a loss of rate cuts or rate hikes coming, but it's not the end of the world. I just want to tell you that just in case we get to that point, I don't want it to be too doom and gloom. And honestly, I think markets might have even overreacted a little bit. And maybe this is why we're starting to see this recovery. At the time of recording, Bitcoin is back above 70K. We're fighting for our lives here, bouncing back and forth between 70 and 71, ETH above 2. And I have a clip here I want to show you. This is from a former Fed vice chairman. He's going to talk us down a little bit and explain why markets might have overreacted a little bit to the news. But what I'm going to tell you next, I do think is a pretty big risk for crypto and really the entire asset market. But first, let's hear why we shouldn't panic right now.
Yeah, I think the markets are reading it a little bit more strongly hawkish than it was. If you ask me which side of 50-50 was it on, I guess I would say hawkish, but not very hawkish.
So yes, it was hawkish, but it wasn't the end of the world. However, and this is where I want to put my serious face on. What he went on to say, what he went on to allude to, we're going to hear from Powell here in a second, honestly could be a pretty big problem for us, because as we know, we have a new Fed chair coming in. We have Kevin Warsh coming in, and he's Trump's Fed chair pick. He's going to cut rates and print money and all of these things. Even though some people think he's going to be a hawk, I don't think at all. I think he's going to be a dove. There's a possible roadblock. So let's hear it from Powell himself, and then we'll talk about it.
On the question of whether I will then continue to serve as a governor after my term ends and after the investigation is over, I have not made that decision yet. And I will make that decision based on what I think is best for the institution and for the people we serve.
Basically what this means is that Powell might be staying on the board. I know what you're saying. His term as chair is up. He has to leave in May as the chair. he can stay on as a voting member. And basically what this means is that he might be around to influence rate cut decisions even after Warsh is there. So Warsh could be in his chair, but then you have Powell in as someone who casts a vote, because it's not all about what the chair wants. The committee casts votes individually. And what's been happening is that it's less about what the chair wants and more about what the committee votes on as a whole. So if you have someone in there who's influential like Powell and has gravitas and can sway other voting members, he might steer things away from the way we want to go. Right now, we want rate cuts. We want looser monetary policy. We want easier capital. We want restrictions to come off of the labor market, and we want to help accelerate markets a little bit. What we don't want is somebody in there preventing that from happening. And I think he will for a couple reasons. Right now, he's a big inflation hawk. He's worried about inflation. He's downplaying the risks to the labor market. Basically, what this means is that he's giving excuses why we shouldn't cut rates. If he stays on the board, he might convince other people that we shouldn't cut rates. Aside from that, Trump are basically mortal enemies at this point. And so you say, okay, he shouldn't bring that into his decision making, but let's be honest. He's a person. He is a human being. He is going to bring that grudge with him. If you were Powell and you're getting bullied and have lawsuits thrown at you by Trump, what would you do? Would you stick around and maybe mess with him a little bit? I don't know if I would, but maybe I would. And so these are the risks that I wanted to make this video and tell you about. The fact that we might be getting rate hikes. I mean, we very well could be. If oil continues to push prices higher and we see inflation go higher, the Fed eventually may very well hike rates. I know what they say, you're not going to hike rates. I might get some beef in the comments. That's fine. I think there's a possibility. I don't like to say it, but I think that's a possibility. Also, what we have to accept is that Powell might stay on the Fed and just basically be a thorn in our side. He could be there until January 2028. And then you basically have two competing voices, and we don't know which way to go. And uncertainty always brings out the worst in crypto prices. As developments come in, I will continue to keep you informed. And if you appreciated this video and you want to get those updates, make sure you subscribe down below. I very much appreciate it. A lot of work goes into these videos, and it makes my day when you subscribe. Also, leave me a comment. Let me know if you learned anything. Do you think that the Fed is going to hike rates, or are they going to cut rates when Warsh gets in? At either rate, thank you for being here. We'll see you in the next video.